Hello, and welcome to the 34th episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And today we are talking about philosophy of language in the modern era of philosophy. What do you think of this chapter? Just to give our viewers or listeners
mostly boring.
Mostly boring?
Or mostly, yes. I'd say 60%. Which is a lower percentage than I thought it was going to be.
I really enjoyed this chapter, actually.
I thought of you when I was reading it.
Yes, well.
That made me 5% more bored.
Wow. You're in quite a mood today.
Yeah. No, I thought I don't like to talk about talking.
Yes.
And so some of this was about that, but I don't know, maybe I was just in a better mood to evaluate this stuff. What do you liked it?
Yes, I thought it was very interesting.
You're the resident linguist.
Yes. Well, not quite yet.
Well, what makes one a linguist?
I don't know. I guess I'd probably have to take some sort of linguistics classes.
I don't know. Do you?
I would think so.
Well, I don't know. I really don't think that's true.
Why not?
Well, just because, we could talk about the nature of expertise,
yes.
but just taking classes doesn't qualify you to do anything.
Well, I guess that's true.
Especially in the modern era.
Very true.
Maybe you can't be recognized as a linguist unless the Linguistic Club of America certifies you as a member or something.
Mm-hmm. All right, starting off with Frege.
I bet you they have really wild parties.
The Linguistics Society? The Linguistics Club? There's a Linguistics Club at Truman State.
Is it really?
Yes.
How many members?
I don't know. It doesn't say.
Well, once you show up, it'll be one.
All right. Starting off with Frege on sense and reference.
So wait a second. Are we going to have an introduction into the topic of language?
Well, go ahead.
Well, why don't I have to do it?
Well, because you're the one who said we should.
So it's the modern philosophers talking about the philosophy of language and how we express our ideas and trying to analyze the words that we use.
Yes.
And the concepts that underlie them.
Yes, that's a good summary. Good introduction.
And that's why I was 60% bored.
Yes. So starting off with Frege. So Frege kind of splits names, which are kind of just words or expressions used to describe a specific thing. He splits those into two sections. So a name has a reference, which is the object to which an expression refers, and a sense, in the particular mode in which a sign presents what it designates. And so for the example that he uses for this, the morning star and the evening star. So we know now kind of astronomically that the words the morning star and the evening star both actually refer to the planet Venus. But when you're talking about those two things, if we use the morning star in a sentence and we use the evening star in the sentence, sure, the reference is the same, but the sense is different. We're referring to the same object, but we're talking about it in a different sense.
Yeah, that's a very good explanation of his views on that.
Yes, and I'm guessing the kicker is, why do we care?
Yeah, well, what difference does it make? I mean, what is the purpose behind? I'm sure that it was explained in this, but I'm just wondering, why did he spend so much time trying to figure out how to categorize that?
I think what it all boils down into is making sure their system is foolproof. So basically, in their system of finding the truth in any sort of statement, any sort of expression, you have to start from the basics. Because if you don't start from the basics, then you run into confusion. Well, I was referring to this expression, when in reality we're referring to the same thing. I guess that's kind of where you have to kind of separate the sense of the reference.
All right. I was thinking that anytime you want to make it foolproof, you just get rid of all the fools.
Really knocking them out of the park this time, Dad. Good job.
Good explanation. I just peeked on that one.
Yeah,
good explanation.
Sure did. And then he also kind of states that color is what is lost in translation. And this is something that I really agree with.
Color is kind of like color commentary as opposed to the actual color itself, don't you think?
Yeah, in a way. So sort of how...
In a way. In every way.
Not really.
He's not talking about like red, pink, and purple, is he?
Well, he's talking about the actual sort of appearance and style of the language.
Right,
not the actual... Yeah, French is not blue.
Right.
German is not red. Yes, it's not technically...
I think I was just making a very simple point. You decided to try to contradict me.
Well, I wasn't contradicting you. I just don't think it was... Okay. So, and I think that's something that I really agree with, and it's just something that a lot of people echo over time, is that it's always better to read the original a writing of something rather than a translation. If you can take the time to study that language, it is,
because you may lose some of the meaning.
Yeah, some of the meaning, some of the just overall mood or tone of the writing. That was really what made it it was really a central feature of that writing that's been just completely eliminated in translation. That's all I have to say about that, I guess, if you don't have anything to add on that one.
I don't really think there's anything to add.
All right. And so then Frege kind of goes on to talk about mental images. And so how a lot of philosophers before him had kind of defined, how we know things is that we call up a mental image, and that's the only way that we know things. And he really disagrees with that because Frege definitely states that mental images vary from person to person, whereas when we look at the senses of a word, that sort of sense is common to everybody. So what he kind of means by that, if I imagine Venus, I have a different mental picture of Venus than you probably would, just because, we have different sort of, experiences.
Well, when you say the word Venus, I immediately think of Bananarama, which sang, I'm your Venus.
Okay.
I'm your fire. It's your desire. In the 80s.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was not alive then.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, that is a fact.
The music still exists.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am aware.
Even if it was created before you were born.
Yes. Well, I have a Billy Preston album sitting right next to you, which was created many years before I was born.
Is he dead?
I don't know. Probably.
Really? You think so?
I don't know. Maybe.
He's got a lot of keyboards.
Yeah, he does. So do I. So back to what I was saying. If my mental image of Venus is different from yours, but the sense is shared between everybody in that language. So when I say the evening star or the morning star, that sort of sense is the same to us. We both know what that is referring to, that sort of sense of the word, whereas our mental image is different. And that's where he kind of refutes, the mental image is not what calls to mind. So the mental image is not how we actually understand that thing.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, I guess.
I don't know why. Who cares? Why do we care? Tell me why I care about this.
Well, I think this next point is kind of important.
Okay, good. Go.
Where he states that asserting a sentence does not equate to putting a sentence together. And I think that's kind of lost on some people. Just like
you lost me.
Oh my God.
What?
You're being very negative.
I'm a listener advocate today.
Because, we kind of see this in like writing and sort of things, like when a lot of like really, for Lord of the Rings, for example, that was banned by a lot of like Christian parents who didn't want their kids reading that because they believed that it advocated for, pagan gods or magic and that sort of thing. But what's kind of lost there is that, just by creating these sentences does not mean that you are asserting that this thing is true. And I think that's what's really lost on a lot of people. You look at something, you say, oh, well, this person said this without actually getting the full context of that thing. Is that just like a sort of hypothetical situation that they're putting out there? Is that something that they're definitively stating, this is true, this is what I believe? Or is this just something that they have created?
I understood.
Yes, good. I'm glad you understood what I was saying.
I still don't understand why that matters philosophically.
Well, I don't really know.
Oh, okay.
You're the one with the philosophy degree.
That doesn't mean anything. We already went over that.
And so towards the end of his life, Frege kind of recognized that...
he was wrong about everything?
Well, not wrong about everything, but wrong about his understanding of truth. He believed that truth was an object, really, up until the end of his life. But then he realized it was more of a property, something that you apply to statements,
Right.
There's no
true
specific
truth.
one truth that we are searching for. It is just something that we apply to all these other statements.
Right. You can't go on a quest to find it.
Yes.
It's just a quality of things that are true.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It is not separate in and of itself.
Yes. Moving on to the pragmatists on language and truth.
Yes.
So they believed...
I remember liking Pierce when I studied him many years ago, but I can't remember why. Do you like his stuff?
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's kind of hit or miss, I think. So they really put a lot of emphasis into signs. And so they believe that a sign stands for an object by being understood or interpreted. And there are three types of signs. There are natural signs, like for example, if you see clouds, that's a sign that there might be rain later. There are iconic signs, such as, paintings or sculptures or maps. And there are symbols, which are words or uniforms or traffic signals, basically things that kind of tell us like how to do something, I guess, is where that would come from.
Yeah. They're like a concept.
Yes.
And a sign. And that's why I did like this. A sign stands for an object by being understood or interpreted by an intelligent being.
Mm-hmm.
The interpretation is itself a further sign.
Yes.
So it's really two things. It is itself, and then it is how it is interpreted.
Mm-hmm. That's what a sign is. And then James here. I don't even know who James is. Do they even say James's first name in here?
In a previous chapter.
In the previous chapter.
Yeah.
Well, whoever James is,
Yeah.
he kind of summarizes the pragmatist's beliefs on truth. I'm going to read these couple sentences here. He says that truth, concretely considered, is an attribute of our beliefs, and these are attitudes that follow satisfactions. The ideas around which the satisfactions cluster are primarily only hypotheses that challenge or summon a belief to come and take its stand upon them. The pragmatist's idea of truth is just such a challenge. He finds it ultra-satisfactory to accept it and takes his own stand accordingly. So basically what they're saying about truth is that truth is this thing that we are kind of ever striving to basically kind of fight for, I guess, in a way. Is that something we're trying to like battle against our own beliefs, really kind of put the truth to the test, really figure out what is truth by really going through this sort of rigorous process to find it. It's not just one certain thing. It is almost this sort of process to get there.
It's something that's been verified or is at least verifiable. Mm-hmm. It should be William James, I think.
William James? Yeah, that sounds right. And so they kind of believe that this sort of just adds to the common sense notion of truth. So it's not so much something extra that we kind of have to deal with. It's something that we just already kind of have the ability to do in a way, find this sort of common sense attitude toward truth and just pursue that further. It's kind of an addition onto that. You
know what's a good common sense truth?
What?
Never trust a man with two first names, like
William James. I don't know why that has to do with anything, but thank you for that piece of advice.
You're welcome.
Now, something else that the pragmatists also said is that truth is relative. And I'm not entirely sure that I agree with this. And I think this is where they kind of lose me in some sort of their beliefs on truth. Because they really believe that it's very much tied to our own beliefs. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there is a truth that is separate from anything that anybody believes. And they kind of make this distinction between truth and reality. But I think truth is reality. I don't think there should be...
Well, I guess I think what they're saying, and I could be wrong, but I think what they're saying is that if you're telling the truth,
yes,
it is your perception. It's almost like they're talking about honesty, as opposed to what is. And that's what I gather what they're saying as far as talking about your perceptions being true or having truth.
This just kind of echoed to me that phrase, this is my truth, which I know is a statement that you do not like, because there is a truth. There is not a personal truth for everybody.
Right.
If there's a truth for everybody, then there's no truth at all.
I will give you another general rule about truth.
Yes.
Is that if anyone says, that's my truth, they are wrong. It is their false. It's just every time they're wrong. Whatever it is, that's my truth. Okay. Just file it away. This person is a liar and a dangerous person. Stay away from them.
That's good advice.
So if you're ever on a date with some girl and she says, well, that's my truth, say, I've had a really fun evening. I think it's time for us to go.
Fair enough.
And then never speak to her again. Well, get her home safely and all that stuff.
Moving on to Russell's theory of description. And he kind of starts this off with basically stating what being is. And I think I kind of really like this description. So I'm going to read it. I know you hate when I read things from the book.
No, that's okay. But first, after looking at this chapter, I regretted a little bit not naming one of my sons Bertrand.
Bertrand Russell? You like that name?
Bertrand Bishop.
Bertrand Bishop?
Yeah. Maybe one of the dogs.
Yeah. You should have named one of us Archie.
Well, I was vetoed 4 times. That's why we have Archie the dog.
Yes, which is, of course, Archbishop when you shortened. I was saying that to the listeners. I wasn't explaining that to you.
Yeah, so I know what I was doing. I still think I should get a little bishop's hat, like those miniature pope hats. But somehow I do think it's disrespectful. Did you see in the news? We're going off a tangent. I'm just going to go this way.
Okay.
There was a big controversy with the Jesuits, of course, because the Jesuits are horrible people now. And because one of their own, he was secretary for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. He wasn't a bishop, but he's a priest, and he was like their general secretary, their head administrative guy. And it was controversial because there was like a Catholic publication that did some research and actually accessed some databases legally, and was able to track this guy's phone through public record sources. And basically everywhere he went, he was hooking up with other dudes on Grindr.
Oh.
And so they contacted his bishop for a comment, and him for a comment, and then he resigned. He didn't resign as a priest, of course, because, whatever. But he resigned his position with the Conference of Catholic Bishops. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, so
I don't really know how we got there.
So we got there because I always thought that if I got a little bishop hat, it would be disrespectful to bishops. But I think now, it would be disrespectful to Archie the dog.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Back to Bertrand Russell.
Going back to Bertrand.
Yeah, read your excerpt. Where are you at?
I am on page 854.
All right, you're a page ahead of me.
So
read it. So this is about being. It's about being,
yes, this is about
this concept of being. Okay.
Yes. So I have a feeling I'm going to start talking. You're going to interrupt me again.
It's echoing Parmenides.
Yes.
Parmenides.
So Bertrand Russell believed that being is that which belongs to every conceivable term, to every possible object of thought, in short, to everything that can possibly occur in any proposition, true or false, and to all such propositions themselves. A is not must always be either false or meaningless. For if A were nothing, it cannot be said not to be, and it could not be said not to be. A is not. A is not. Excuse me. Let me just start the sentence over.
Start that one over. Yes.
A is not must always be either false or meaningless. For if A were nothing, it could not be said not to be. A is not implies that there is a term A whose being is denied, and hence that A is. Thus, unless A is not be an empty sound, it must be false. Whatever A may be, it certainly is. Numbers, the Homeric gods, relations, chimeras, and four-dimensional spaces all have being, for if they were not entities of a kind, we could make no propositions about them. Thus, being is a general attribute of everything, and to mention anything is to show that it is. So this is very much similar to that argument that was made for the proof of God's existence, basically saying if we even can argue about God, then there must be some sort of God, or else there's nothing to argue about. That's basically what he's saying here about being, is that, any term that we say, there has to be some level of being applied to it. Otherwise, there's no way we can even talk about it.
Do you agree with that?
I think I do.
Why?
Because it's not so much that it has to exist in like an actual reality sense, like he points to chimeras or that sort of thing.
Isn't it a chimera?
No, chimera.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it's chimera?
Yeah.
No, it's chimera.
With a CH?
Yes. CHIMERA.
All right. Well, you do your thing.
Okay. So because it's not so much that it has to actually exist in reality, sort of in the sense that we can like see and touch it and that sort of thing, but just in the sense that, there has to be some sort of collective idea about it, and therefore being is applied to it. So, when he talks about these mythological creatures, the Homeric gods, it's not so much that they, physically sort of exist for us in this sense, but in that they have a level of being so much that we understand them and comprehend them and have some way to talk about them.
Yeah, I don't have, I guess I have a problem with the term being used of being.
Yeah.
Because I consider being as if it's something in existence in a physical sense. Mm-hmm. And to say that a dragon, or let's say Sauron. Sauron doesn't.
Sauron from the Lord of the Rings.
No, Sauron.
No, Sauron from the Lord of the Rings.
Well, then you'll agree that Sauron doesn't exist. Sauron or Sauron doesn't exist. Well, Sauron doesn't exist. Or Sauron.
Yeah, Sauron is not a real physical thing.
So it's a concept, but is it a being? Is it part of being?
As Russell understands it, every term has to have being. It has to have some level of reality so far as we can understand it. Otherwise, there's nothing to argue about. Because otherwise, you could just say just random noises. That wouldn't have any being, because that's not a term that applies to anything. You know, if I just...
What if I make up my own language, like, what's his face did? Tolkien.
Well,
do those things have being in his language? I mean,
well, yeah, they refer to something. If you just make a random set of noises that doesn't refer to anything, that's not a thing that has being.
But as soon as I conceive of the random noise...
Yes.
Referencing some concept,
yes,
then that is part of being.
Yes. Because it has something that it's referring to and it has some level of understanding applied to it. Because otherwise, if it has no level of understanding there, then it's not anything at all. You look very confused.
I'm not confused. I'm just trying to think of the practical utility of the concept of being that's so broadly defined as anything that anyone can possibly think of is then being.
Essentially.
So who cares then? I mean, it's like, how does that help us understand the universe or anything about it? If anything I can conceive of is being, because being to me is a consciousness, is a physical thing in existence that has some level of consciousness. That's what I think of as a being.
I guess the use that I see from it is a way to like almost combat the skeptics. You know, because they can say, well, how do you know that this exists? How do you believe this? And, you know, they can basically, you could tear any argument down with a very, very skeptical approach by basically saying, you know, well, how do you know we're even referring to the same thing, et cetera, et cetera. But this is saying, well, we're arguing about something, aren't we? So we both have some sort of notion of that. So it has to be in some level. Therefore, we can at least talk about it in this sense.
Yeah,
that's the utility I see.
I think both the extreme skeptics and this really generalized concept of being are absurd. I think the skeptics are absurdly cynical and questioning everything so that there is no meaning. Yeah. And I think that so broadly defining being as anything anyone can think of, no matter how bizarre, is being, is also absurd.
Yeah.
And I don't think very helpful. I do want to, I'm going to forget this if I don't say it now. It's going to be later, but I'm going to say it now. I'm going to steal your thunder. Okay. I really liked the statement later in the chapter. I forget who it was about, but we'll get there. That language and the cultural concepts that you learn are in existence outside of you. And, you know, like the whole concept of
that's the last section we get here, the private language.
I think therefore I am the private language is one of the best arguments for the existence of the world around you without you. You know, that you're not the only thing that exists, because that language that we learn was taught to us by someone else. It's not something that we taught ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that's probably the best argument, that we are not a self-created concept. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Were you going to get to that later?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah. I mean that particular thing.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I was just thinking I wanted to make sure we got that out. That's a little foreshadowing for our listener.
Yeah, so stay tuned for the exhilarating end. Yeah.
So I think we've covered the being thing.
Yes. I was going to talk about, he points out this, Russell does, he points out this difference between plain false and positively false when we're looking at statements. And the two examples he kind of uses here is these two sentences. The first is, the sovereign of the United Kingdom is male. And second, the sovereign of the United States is male. So the first sentence is false because it's just not true. You know, the sovereign of the United Kingdom, that's plain false. You know, the sovereign of the United Kingdom is the queen.
You know, there's other people that would say that, gender fluidity, but we won't get into that.
Yes.
All right.
The second one is positively false because the United States has no sovereign. So when we're talking about that, that's not just not true because, we can't just say definition. It's not true by definition. You know, no matter what, that is not true, because there is no sovereign of the United States. And he just kind of uses this distinction a little bit further to really just kind of say, we need to point out the difference between fact and just misleading arguments, basically. When we're looking at these things, it's not always just so much that there is, either yes or no, this is correct, or, there's this other kind of option. Is this even worded properly? Is this even true to begin with? Can we even consider this statement at all to be true? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so these positively false statements can never even be considered at all to be true.
I like this reference to Russell, and I forget who the other one he was talking about here, but it's the end of that page that you're talking about. Where I'm at. 855, I really agree with this. They both regard it as essential that such language should contain only expressions with a definite sense, by which they mean that all sentences containing the expressions should have a truth value. Mm-hmm. If we allow into our system sentences lacking a truth value, then inference and deduction become impossible. And I completely agree with that. There has to be some understanding of the definitional terms of the debate, or else you can't deduce or infer things from that language. And that's where you see the power of language and the power of shifting meaning of words and the rewriting of history and the ever-changing rules, and usually in communist societies where they change the rules or they're so ambiguous. And that's a real benefit to a totalitarian state, is to have very ambiguous terms, especially in the legal system. So people aren't really on notice. And then it's just the people that go to jail, the ones they, as they say, find the man and I'll find the crime. I think it was a Soviet expression, where they could, the laws are so broadly written that you're debating, or you don't have any definitive meaning for them.
Yeah. I'd made a note of this too, and I think that's kind of the answer to, why do I care if we're defining all these things, is because I think they knew that their systems would be attacked by other philosophers who have nothing better to do than to point out, oh, this is an inconsistency here, then your whole system falls apart because this isn't true here. Yeah. I think that's why all these philosophers bother with, going through complete, from the get-go, is because they know other people will pick apart their work, and they have to make sure it's as sound as possible. Otherwise, they'll have their whole argument dismissed.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, moving on to the picture theory of the proposition.
This is the 60%.
Wittgenstein?
I have no notes on
really?
That entire section.
Really?
I didn't underline anything.
I made quite a few notes.
Well, knock yourself out.
Yes,
maybe you can tell me why I should care about this section.
Well, let me just talk about it for a little bit, and then I'll try to figure out why I care.
Oh, all right.
So this is Wittgenstein, his picture theory of the proposition. So he believed that language disguised the structure of thought beyond recognition, and that the task of philosophers was to uncover the naked form of thought beneath. So basically, language really obstructs our thoughts. It's not entirely helpful, and the most pure way to understand things is just with thought itself. And so his picture theory was more of a theory of representation in general, because he believed that everything can kind of be defined as a picture. And every picture consists of structure and pictorial relationships. And so the example he kind of uses here is, you imagine you're in a court case or of some sort, where there's, a car and a stroller. And to reenact the scene of the crime, you have a toy car and a toy stroller. And he kind of says, well, of course, the toy car represents the actual car, the stroller represents the actual stroller. And then you have those set up in a way to mimic the scene. And that's kind of what he's talking about when he uses this pictorial theory, this picture theory, to refer to language, in that every single word we use refers to something real, but it has to be arranged in such a way to actually refer to the thing as it exists in real life. So, it has that structure, or has that pictorial relationship, meaning that it refers to one term, and then we actually use those terms to set up the structure, actually making them correlate to reality. And that's his picture theory of language. Do you have any questions? I feel like I'm a teacher.
Yeah. Yes, I do, Mr. Bishop. It sounds like a theory that somebody who likes to take LSD all the time would come up with. Well, man, we only think in pictures, and that's just not true, right? I mean, I think the language. Like, we think in words generally. I mean, we do think in concepts too, but I think a lot of what we think when we think to ourselves, or maybe it's just me. We think in words.
Yes.
Don't we?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Now we may dream in concepts, but I think when you're really analyzing things, you're not thinking in pictures.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that's what he's really saying, though.
But my point is that language is the foundation of intelligent thought.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have language, what do you have?
I think this is almost
pictograms.
I think this is almost a theory of like how we came to have language in a way, in that first we found the pictorial relationship. We have a term for something that actually exists, and then we figured out how to kind of structure those to sort of paint that picture. Where those words are actually situated, and I think that's really what he's kind of talking about here, as far as I understand it, which is not a professional understanding.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Moving along, or are you still on that?
I think that's all I have to cover with that.
Yeah, I didn't think that really helped me any.
Yeah.
I mean, your explanation did, but
Yes.
I don't know why. What influence Wittgenstein's pictorial representations had.
And then we get to language games and private languages.
Yeah,
and this is Wittgenstein again, and he basically says that he disagrees with everything that he did beforehand and moves into this different understanding of language. So you believe that language is embedded in social activities and structures, and this is what language games refers to.
Do you notice that none of these philosophers are being condemned to death during this period?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. It's a little less interesting. The stakes are lower. But like in the Middle Ages, like they kept getting ostracized and condemned and ordered to silence. And
when we inevitably create our own philosophical system, are you hoping that we'll be condemned?
I know we'd be condemned. That's why I don't want this social media thing to get. I don't want this podcast to actually be listened to by anybody because somebody's waiting to condemn us.
Back to what I was saying about Wittgenstein.
Wait for the overlords to take over.
Oh my God!
They're starting to get into the banking system, Adam.
Oh.
PayPal and Venmo.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna the idiots at the Southern Poverty payola system. Southern Poverty. What's the name of that group that just rakes in millions and millions of dollars every year? You know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea.
Yeah, they're partnering with like Facebook and all these social media and now banking, online banking communities to censor any conservatives. Wait for it. It's coming, Adam.
Back to what I was saying about Wittgenstein. So these language games, these aren't necessarily like actual games that we would play. He's just really referring to any situation in which we use language, because
I was kind of looking forward to this chapter when I saw that. Oh, language games. I wonder how you play a language game, but it wasn't like that kind of game.
He's basically saying that language is just embedded in every social activity, which is very, very true.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he also believed that understanding is not a process. And this is kind of how he kind of formulates that argument. He says, when do we understand a sentence? When we have uttered the whole of it, or while we are uttering it? Is the understanding an articulated process like the speaking of the sentence, and does its articulation correspond to the articulation of the sentence? Or is it non-articulated, accompanying the sentence in the way in which a pedal point accompanies a melody? So basically what he's saying is, where do we actually draw the line? When do we actually comprehend the sentence? And he kind of says, well, we don't have that line almost. It's not this process. It's a state. We either understand or we don't, and that's it. You can't really point to, if I'm halfway through my sentence, do I understand then? Or do I understand at the end of it, at the beginning? It's just we understand or we don't, and that's about it.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah. Because, I kind of think about that sometimes, at what point, when I'm listening to somebody talk, do I actually comprehend the point that they're making in the end? And I think that, it depends on what they're saying, but, I can't really break it down halfway through a sentence or anything.
Yes, and our listener is drifting off and half listening to the things we're saying, and some of them are interesting, and other times they're just doing other things, and they kind of don't pay attention to us. No. They don't understand it because they aren't listening to us. And they come back in.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's an accurate description. That's a pretty interesting way of looking at. I think that's a little bit more interesting than the other stuff, because it's like, when do I really know what I'm going to say?
Yeah, it's almost kind of like that thing, like, when you look at your hand and you like move it,
right.
When do I actually tell it to move, or when does that actually happen?
Can you tell your hand? Can you really think of it to move?
No, you just have to will it.
Right.
I can think as much as I want. I want my index finger to move, and it won't move until I actually somehow will it to move.
I would find being paralyzed maddening. I mean, other than the obvious inconvenience and
Yes.
everything. But don't you think that would probably be the most maddening part of it? That you have this limb that, and you want to think to make it move, but you can't. I mean, but you can't think to make anything move.
Yeah.
I don't really think to make my voice move. You know,
No. I think that's what's really
disconcerting.
Yeah.
Very disconcerting. Actually, what I'm like, it's kind of freaking me out.
Yeah, when do I actually want to start talking, or am I
Right.
just saying things?
How do I decide that?
That's trippy.
Speaking of trials, I've got a jury trial 2 days from today.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell us about the case? Or are we going to go off on another tangent here?
Not really. You mentioned a trial earlier, so.
Yes.
But now I'm going to be in the middle of a jury trial in front of all these people, and I'm going to be like,
Am I talking? Am I thinking? What is happening?
How do I start thinking or talking?
So then Wittgenstein also talks about mental images for a little bit, kind of similar to what they were saying beforehand, in that, the mental images are not what actually confers meaning onto something. The images are like the pictures illuminating a written text in a book. So, of course, these help us to understand what we're talking about, but, that understanding, again, is a state. It's not, given to us by this mental image that we already have.
Yeah.
And he also kind of states that acquaintance with an object doesn't suffice without a grasp of the role in language the word to be defined is.
What?
So that was worded really badly. But basically what he's saying, if I understand this term, I can point to an apple and know that that is apple and nothing else. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't get me anywhere if I can't actually use the word apple in speech. We actually kind of have to understand how to refer to things, within the context of the greater speech as a whole. How to use, prepositions and articles, which apple, the apple, or an apple, or, the apple
Fiona
on...
Apple?
Yes, of
She
course.
was an artist.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who Fiona Apple is?
No.
Oh, my gosh.
I know Apple Records. They're the people that did the Beatles. But really what he's kind of saying there is, it's not so much that we just point to things and name them, but we actually have this understanding of language as a whole in order to put those names into language.
Yes. We're moving on to the general philosophical concepts that I alluded to earlier.
Yes, so private language. So Wittgenstein states that there cannot be a language whose words refer to what can only be known by an individual, and that language depends on the existence of public and social world. Mm-hmm. So really, these other kind of philosophers were saying, well, how do I know my red isn't your blue and that sort of thing?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that
we
before.
did. We talked about this many times.
We don't know.
And we don't know, but what he's saying is basically...
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because we're
right.
referring to the same thing. We understand the same concept as we perceive it.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter if, my definite or my mental image isn't the same as yours.
Correct.
Because we have this understanding of language. We innately just know what you're referring to when you say red. We don't have to say, oh, which red, my red or your red. We just know it as red, and that's the point.
We know it's crimson, even if it's green.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Even if we think it's green.
No, we think it's red. But it is green.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like...
yes, if our perception of it, is green.
One of us may have a perception that's wrong, but maybe it's right. But maybe the perception is what makes it right or wrong. But it doesn't matter because we're both referring to the same thing or same concept or appearance or whatever. It's just we're visualizing it differently. Yeah, I like that argument. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
That's a great.
We both just have
rebuttal.
We have this state of understanding. We know what that is. We don't have to argue about whether it's mine or yours. It just is.
One of my favorite philosophical arguments in response to somebody is, so what?
I've noticed.
And that is what he's saying.
I think that is the thing that you have said more times than anything else on this podcast. Why do I care? So what? Why does this matter? And I think that just about sums up 90% of your commentary on any given topic we talk about.
It's maybe I should have. That's my philosophy.
I was actually kind of thinking about that. If I was gonna have a sort of philosophy, I think one of the defining features would be, well, how practical is this to even define?
Yours or mine? Are you trying to steal my philosophy?
Well, everybody steals people's philosophies. I'd go further than that. That's not the one thing in my philosophy, but it's like, this sort of thing. Like,
so basically, I'm Socrates and you're Plato, or am I Plato and you're Aristotle?
I don't know. Either one, I guess.
All right.
Because it's kind of like, because I was thinking with like the whole
I'll
epistemology.
be Socrates because I'm not going to write anything. That's too much work.
Yes.
As
Well,
you go around-
well, it is written. It's just written on invisible paper and invisible ink.
That's correct.
Yes,
Mark
yes.
Bishop's.
Mark Bishop's Book of Knowledge. But yeah, that's what I kind of was thinking about the whole epistemology. You know, how do we?
What you say?
God. So how do we? So you know the limits of knowledge. You know that sort of thing. You know, and it's kind of like why do you care? You know,
Right.
If nothing actually exists, then it doesn't matter if you understand what I'm talking about or not.
Right.
You
So
know,
go away.
So
Yeah,
I'm
so
just going
shut
to
up.
keep. Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. You know, well, how useful is this to actually argue about? You know, let's
Right.
actually talk about the things that matter.
Right. I concede. We don't exist. Now go away. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Well, you win.
Yes.
Now go in the other room while I talk to these other interesting people because you're boring me. That's all you're saying. We don't exist. Okay, fine. Fine. You win. I don't exist for you after you leave this room.
Yes. Do you have any other things to add on this chapter?
I already mentioned my big. I really
Yes.
like that argument about the existence of language and the fact that we learn it from our culture. Really reassures me that this isn't just a simulation with my own mind, because I don't think I created that.
Yeah.
I created everything else. No, but I think that is that is an interesting argument.
I think language is really, the most important thing for humanity as a whole. My opinion. But
It's kind of funny how you're interested in the study of linguistics is similar to when I started to study philosophy, because it's on the one hand completely and totally impractical, but it's also on the other hand the most important study that you can have in life. It's both. It's both completely useless.
Yes.
And the most useful. And in linguistics, maybe even more. I mean, of course, it's intertwined with philosophy too, but it may be the most important aspect of your life. But you don't think about it.
Yeah. That's what I've been thinking.
So
I was also
go ahead.
a little disappointed when I read the kind of the names of these sections in here, because I heard private languages and I thought this was going to talk about invented languages, for fictional languages. I got excited. I'm like,
I thought the same thing actually when I saw that the sub.
It's like I could finally talk about Tolkien with a point to it. It actually relates to the book.
Yeah, that doesn't. There's still no point.
Happen,
No point to somebody making up their own languages. But it was an interesting concept. I really that's the part that I really enjoyed. The other stuff I didn't really like. But
well, yeah. I was going to argue with you, but
about what?
Well, about there's no point to making your own language. Because the way, to go back to Tolkien, the way Tolkien saw it, it's really an art form. The study of language and the creation of language. Because it is almost a really beautiful thing to do. By that same argument, there's no point to painting a painting or making music or that sort of thing. Because there's no real practical purpose. It's just something to look at or something to hear in cases of the painting or the music. But it's still.
I think creating a language that no one else understands is pointless. Now, it's a really good idea to create your own language, but you have to have at least one other person know it so that you can send secret messages after, the fascists come and take over.
Yes.
So that we can have secret messages.
Well, then Tolkien would have succeeded because there's a lot of people that speak his languages now.
Is that right?
Yes.
Name two.
Well, I don't know them. I wish I did, but no.
Do you really? You don't really. No, you don't.
But there are people.
I don't know that you want to know them. You may want to meet them. I think I'd like to meet them too. I think that'd be fascinating.
But I mean, even without actually understanding it, it's kind of the thing. You don't understand any music theory, right?
Well, I don't.
Well,
that's not
you
true.
You don't have a definite grasp of everything in music theory.
That is for sure.
Yes, but you can still enjoy music.
I can.
And so it's kind of the same way as Tolkien kind of saw it with language, especially when you're making your own scripts, your own letters and that sort of thing, or you're just hearing the sounds of this language without even knowing what those words mean. You can appreciate the sounds and appreciate, the sort of writing style or that sort of thing without actually comprehending what's actually being said.
Wasn't there? Did I read somewhere that there was a push to have like a new version, like a more efficient version of the English language back in the early 1900s or something?
Oh yeah, that's been a thing for many years. Like people, there's been different pushes in different ways. So in the 1700s, like mid 1700s, there's a big push to have an academy of English, basically to preserve English as it is, the best English, basically, and because it was really kind of a jab almost at the Americans at the time, because we had started developing our own dialect and that sort of thing, as opposed to the actual British.
And a lot of creative spelling and pronunciation.
Yes, and so they're like, well, we have to regulate this sort of thing, but at the same time, there's also been pushes, to get rid of certain influences on language. Like people do this for fun, to create, purely Germanic English. To take out the French influences and the Latin influences and that sort of thing, and just use actual English words, your Germanic words and that sort of thing. That's a thing common in most all languages, especially when you go into like a very nationalist politics. If somebody really wants to assert themselves as a leader, almost a lot of the times what they'll do is they'll try to control the language. They'll try to say, well, this is the way you should speak. You can't speak any other way. This is pure. This is what it really means to be part of this country, is to speak this sort of language and nothing else.
Well, that's what all this stuff going on.
That's kind of the point that I was kind of pushing towards, is that that's the scariest thing to me, is when people try to regulate language, because this is something that I've studied for fun, not really professionally. But when you look at anybody who tries to regulate language, they are not doing it for good reasons. Right. It is never a good idea to regulate language.
That is why I'm wrestling with the N word. I should have said that while you're taking a drink of water away, because it offends me.
Yes.
That there are certain words that I can't say because of my complexion, but I don't want to use the word.
Yes.
But I almost feel compelled, like I should. Because who are you to say what words I can use?
Yes.
And then it expands to other stuff. And like in these pronouns that people want to be referred to by they're a pronoun of their choice. Well, what gives them the right to impose that upon me? And who has the right to demand what language is used? I mean, that's grammar. And there was a person on a video conferencing court docket today that had her pronouns listed, and I thought, well, it was an attorney not on one of my cases, and it was a she/her pronouns listed anyway, so I wouldn't have violated. But I thought, you know what? If anybody does that, is it really wrong for me to purposely? I mean, is it really wrong for me to purposely misuse the pronouns? And what right do they have to tell me how to use proper English grammar? And all that, I think it's 100% about power and control, about demanding that I comply with their made-up rules. And it's not about, in my view, being accommodating to somebody else and what they prefer. I think it's 100% about power and shoving that down my throat. And I really, really think you're right on the money. That's how you control people, is through the language. That's how you rule a country. And as they said, I think it was how do you say his name? The Gulag Archipelago author, Stolzen. His whole philosophy behind it was, the Soviets, the communists, would tell lies, and they knew they were lying, and they knew you knew they were lying, and they didn't care.
Yeah,
and that's the whole point. And then they made you say the lie. That's the ultimate power. Making someone say a lie that they know is a lie because you have the power over them. That is communism. That is socialism. That is what those people want to do. And that's dangerous territory.
And
that's why the First Amendment is so important. People don't know, and they don't get that. Hey, when the wheel turns and the other side's in power, guess what? We're going to shove that down your throat. And by we, I mean they, because I'm not going to be in the middle of that either. but that the whole other side is going to impose the same thing or double down on it.
Yeah.
And then it's 10 times worse.
Yeah, that's kind of going back to what you're saying, like the sort of hate speech thing. All these people calling, well, we have to ban hate speech, and it's impossible to define. What even is hate speech? If I'm offended by something, can I just, silence that person from saying that thing ever again? And, when you get to those things, it's just, it's just a landslide. So, where do we end it? How much can we just silence people we don't like what they're saying? You can't put a definition on that. And I think that's the worst way to go about treating criticism, is to just say, well, I shouldn't hear that.
Right.
Even outside of criticism, even if somebody is just insulting you or just making fun of you, to be able to say that, oh, well, you shouldn't be able to say that, do this, pay this fine or whatever. I think that's dangerous, because then you get into what even is an insult. How do you even define when somebody is insulting you, or if they're just disagreeing with you?
Correct.
And I think that's when you really go down the rabbit hole of, well, this is just a way for me to silence the people around me.
Yep. It's a way to punish your enemies.
Yes.
The most effective way.
Mm-hmm.
You won't even let them speak. Yep.
Yeah.
So those orders we just kind of alluded to earlier about people ordered into silence. That's what they want to do. They literally want to do it, and it's disturbing. And I didn't think it would be so widespread and so accepted by such a large portion of our population. But the last couple of years have been crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic thing is goofy as all get out too, and I think. I don't know. It seems like something has turned in our country where people are really, really getting their totalitarian impulses. They're like, "Hey, I want to do this. I want to hurt people. I want to punish my enemies." Or what was the famous quote from Conan? To punish our enemies, to steal their land, and to hear the lamentations of their women. Something along those. I remember the lamentation of the women's.
We're kind of going back to that with Trump's ban from Twitter. Did you ever read the 2 tweets that got him banned?
One of them was that he was just not going to the inauguration.
Yes.
That was really the deal breaker.
And it doesn't make any sense, because they banned him for inciting violence, and neither of his tweets were inciting violence.
Well, yeah, and that's the whole thing. That's the lie.
Yeah.
Right, and so they're making all these media people kind of go along with that lie. It was not inciting violence, and you can argue about the January 6th stuff, because he was telling people march on Washington or the Capitol or whatever. And I think that maybe there'd be a good faith argument saying that's what he was going to do, and even though they said peacefully. And I mean, it was a bad move politically.
Yes,
they had no plan, and but having said that, it wasn't an insurrection. If those people would have brought their firearms, which 90% of them had at home, they could have murdered every last one of those politicians there. Yeah. I mean, half of them just walked in, and I'm not kidding. If they wanted to take over Washington, D.C., they easily could have done it, and they still can easily do it. I mean, so it, I mean, it's just complete out-and-out censorship, and they did it just pretty ballsy. Yeah. Because they're like, we're saying these are incitements to violence.
I have the 2 tweets here if you want me to read those out.
Yeah, go ahead.
January 8th, he tweeted, "The 75 million great American patriots who voted for me, America first, and make America great again will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form." Second tweet, "To all of those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. Right. Those are the 2 tweets.
Right.
And I'd like to ask anybody to point out where's the incitement of violence in those.
There's not.
And I don't.
Right.
There's none.
And he was really not going to the inauguration was, I mean, maybe it was better for Biden that Trump not be there. Because if Trump said, "Hey, I'm going to the inauguration, and I want every one of you members to go with me," who knows what it could happen? Yeah. Because and the thing is, Trump had the power, especially after January 6th, and he still has the power.
There's still people like lining up, filling stadiums for him.
Man, no kidding.
All over the place.
If he said, "Look, the January 6th rioters," or whatever you want to call them, I call them rioters because there are a lot of skull knockers and all that kind of stuff, and they did break into the building and all that. It was a criminal act.
Yeah, that's kind of to go back to that just a little bit. Where they're saying it's an insurrection.
I
don't think it's an insurrection. I mean, it's a bunch of angry people who trespassed onto government property.
Yeah, property damage and assaults, assaults on law enforcement officers, but primarily misdemeanors. But
to say that's the greatest threat to democracy that we've ever seen.
Yeah,
it's just a complete
from the Civil War is just insane.
Yes.
Considering there's been shootings of the Capitol. There's been a bombing of the Capitol. All by leftists, of course, but they forget that those things happen, and fairly recently. But there's a lot of guys that are still locked up in solitary confinement for this thing they're calling an insurrection. The FBI is just completely out of control. I mean, it just needs to be disbanded. They were never good anyway. I mean, they spied on civil rights. I mean, you go back decades. They spied on Martin Luther King illegally. I mean, every one of the civil rights leaders. Go back to the 50s. Now and now like this. I don't know if you saw that. We're going way off on a tangent.
That's all right.
But like
that episode anyway.
But the Governor Whitmer abduction plot. Do you know about that?
Yes, I saw that.
And so there's.
Well, you want to explain that to our.
So there's
audience.
Several guys got arrested because they had a plot to abduct Governor Whitmer, who was a governor of Michigan. And they actually had a plan together. They had a guy that was like their explosives expert who was going to blow a bridge or some crazy nonsense. And this other guy was going to get weapons. And a third guy was like their enforcer from out of state. They came in to help recruit people. The explosives guy was an actual FBI agent.
Really?
On payroll. I mean, he was an undercover FBI agent. The three main organizers were either informants, paid informants, or actual undercover FBI agents. There was not a single aspect of that conspiracy that did not involve the active participation and leadership of a paid informant or FBI agent.
Oh my God.
Every step of the way, and the guys that were involved that were not FBI agents and informants. I mean, there's one car that had 4 guys in it, and 3 of them were either informants or FBI agents on this thing. And so a couple carloads of guys. And so then the question is, wait a second, okay, who created this crime? Now, the guys that went along with it, normally I don't like this entrapment argument because it's like, well, they have to have an informant to know what's going on, and when the informant's in there, you gotta act like they're along with, hey, let's go gung ho.
But when 3 of them are part of the leadership process and actually planning this thing,
so the question is, would this have ever happened had the FBI not organized it or been involved in the organization of it? And it seems clear about the pleadings and the recordings that they've released so far, no, it would have never happened. So it's kind of like they're always in a fine line. Like when you're trying to infiltrate the mob, you use informants who are bad guys who are committing crimes anyway.
Yes.
And so your informant is committing crimes, so that doesn't invalidate the prosecutions. All these other guys doing murders when this guy witnesses them or whatever, and he says, go ahead, that's great. Because they have the intent to commit the crime absent the actions of the informant or the agent. This conspiracy theory, this conspiracy plot, is a whole different animal. Yeah. And then you look at that and you say, wait a second, how many of these guys that were organizing the real violent actors on January 6th, which there was I don't know what the percentages are, because you can't even tell how many people were violent, how many people were just there. Because they won't release any of the video surveillance of any of this stuff. You see a couple of videos that people just kind of strolling through, like they're roped off, and they're oh, look at this, there's like a bunch of grandmas taking pictures. But then you see these other videos where these guys are like really like trying to beat the hell out of the security people, and other times the guards are like, well, that crazy shaman guy with the horn hat and all that stuff. Yes. Poor guy, he's a paranoid schizophrenic and he's bipolar. He's still in solitary confinement as of today. And there's a video of him going in there, and he says a prayer with one of the guards, and he says the guard says, as long as you guys aren't being violent, we can walk in there. So they walk in together into the well of the Capitol building, where and then he's up on the speaker's chair and all that kind of stuff. They're taking pictures of him, and nobody is ordering, you have to get out. And then here's a guy who clearly has mental health issues. I mean, look at him. He's dressed up like a clown. and they call him the Q shaman or whatever. And he's arrested for what? I mean, he walks into the place, he talks to the guard. The guard basically gives him permission. What the hell else is he supposed to do? And so then the question is, okay, how many of these organizers, and there's several of them, several of the organizers of groups of men that went there, Proud Boy types and all that kind of stuff, that were organized by FBI agents. I mean, it's just the truth, but they aren't releasing all of those details. But you see all these unindicted co-conspirators that of course aren't going to be charged with a crime because they're working with the FBI to keep this thing going.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just looks like a big old setup.
Yeah.
And then you look at the media misreporting on it and saying how terrible it is. It wasn't great. I'm not saying it was
5
great.
people died that day. 1 was shot by police.
Yeah, murdered.
Yes.
I'm not going to say that she was just shot. She was just flat out murdered by that guy. Have you ever seen the video?
No, I haven't.
I saw the video before they took it down. So they've got this huge raucous crowd in there, and the guy videotaping it is like an Antifa videographer. So he's at all these Antifa riots, but be that as it may, I'm not saying Antifa did this. I mean, there's a lot of people there, Trump supporters there. But they're at like a closed door that looks like it's been roughly barricaded from the other side. And they've broken through the window panes. They're beautiful, like wooden doors with these big wooden panes. There's about a half a dozen cops in riot gear coming kind of from the rear of the crowd. They're within the crowd in a stairwell area. And anyway, so they break through this glass, and you can see from the video, it's a black Capitol Police officer, like in plain clothes, like in a blazer. And he's in a door where there's like the doors would open up to a hallway with a series of offices. And the immediate door on the left, as you look through these glass panes, the doorway, the black officer's there. I don't know why I mentioned he's black, but he is black. And he's got a gun drawn. He's got a pistol out, and he's pointing at the door. And as they're kind of breaking into the door, he backs into the room where he was from, and then he kind of comes out a half a step, and he backs back, but he's pointing his gun at this Ashley Babbitt as she's breaking in the window. She starts climbing over the debris or whatever to get into that window. He's not yelling at her, stop, or I'll shoot. He doesn't give her any warning at all. He takes like a step or two forward and shoots her right in the head. One shot. It's a headshot. And they say she was shot in the neck, maybe, but pop, she falls backward and dies. And that's it. And there is under no circumstances is that a justifiable shooting.
Yeah.
Under no circumstances. You have to give somebody a warning in the people's house, And if he would have, because he's off to her left, she can't see him.
Yeah.
She never even sees him until she's shot. If he would have put that gun up to her face and said, "You better back up, or I'm going to shoot you right between the eyes," damn well she would have backed up. But he didn't even give her that opportunity. Yeah. So that's the murder.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there were 2, I believe, drug overdoses. Or there was 1 or 2.
I don't know about that. I know there was a stroke.
There was a stroke, yes.
The officer Sicknick had nothing to do with the Capitol. They said he was in one of the deaths, but he died of natural causes the next day, probably a stroke. There was a guy who had a heart attack. There are basically four natural deaths.
Yes.
That they thought one gal may have had injuries from being trampled. So in a sense, that one probably is the only one that really was caused by the riot, other than the murder of Ashley Babbitt. But the murder of Ashley Babbitt doesn't really go against the protesters, so to speak, except for they did create an environment, but lethal force was not justified. Yes. I mean, it's not even close. But this whole use of the word insurrection, treason. Nobody's charged with insurrection. Nobody's charged with treason. There's like over 500 defendants. Vast majority are trespassing. And you know what? I don't like the idea of charging people with trespassing in a public building.
Yeah.
Right? Why? It used to be in presidential inaugurations, the president would be sworn in, and the public would go into the White House. And they stopped that because they'd all get drunk. They had a bunch of broken out windows, and people would be coming in through the side doors. It was just mayhem. I mean, literal mayhem.
Well, kind of to mention that Joe Biden once just walked into the Capitol when he was younger.
Oh, is that right?
Did you know that? He just walked right in.
Yeah. Well, it used to
be much more open, but
yeah. Well, that's the whole.
Well, he went like not even just into the Capitol building, but like down into the chamber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is that a story he told? Well, I don't know if I want to believe. If that's a story he told. He tells a lot of stories.
That's a very fair point.
There was a time. Yeah. I was arrested, with Nelson Mandela. What the hell are you talking about? No, you weren't. You were not arrested.
This is a complete tangent. We're like way off from our topic now. But have you? I've mentioned this to you, but to mention this to the podcast, there's an interview where a reporter comes up to him, asks if there's people in the Democratic Party who want to defund the police, and he turns and he looks at her and he goes, "Are there people in the Republican Party who say we're sucking the blood out of babies?"
Yeah.
And
the reporter doesn't say anything to that.
She just goes, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
No, yeah.
What do you say?
And the fact of the matter is, he's non compos mentos. He's never been bright. He's always been a dumb man. He's always been a liar. He was run out of the presidential primary way back in '88 because he was found out to be a plagiarist in college. Almost kicked out of law school for that. He was at the bottom of his class, but he lied and said he was at the top third of his class. He said he had 2 degrees. He did not. He had 1 degree. I mean, he lies about the time of day. Mm-hmm. He will lie about everything. And that's what's so bizarre when they say, vote for Biden because Trump lies about everything. Trump is not Mr. Honesty either. Mm-hmm. But he's a piker compared to Biden. And the way they use language, segueing back into our podcast, is to redefine the word lie. Mm-hmm. To only apply it to Republicans or conservatives. And he is, and it's so, I never understood the story about
corn pop.
Well, I don't understand that either, but no, they'll
that's an amazing story.
They'll fable about the king has no clothes. Mm-hmm. Like the innocent child, where they're all saying, "Oh, isn't the king's clothes beautiful?" And look at that outfit.
For some context, yeah, the king is tricked into thinking he has this beautiful, set of invisible clothes that everybody else can see, but he's really just walking around naked.
Right.
And the townspeople are like, "Oh, that's a beautiful outfit, king,"
right.
and that sort of thing.
Right, because they're either intimidated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody they don't want to be the one to tell him that he's naked.
Mm-hmm.
Till the kid says, "Hey, why is that guy not wearing clothes?" Oh, shush, And the same thing is true about Joe Biden's mental state. Mm-hmm. There are times where he seems very coherent, but they're fewer and fewer and far between. And he's in charge. He's not in charge. And it's really his wife, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a struggle behind the scenes between Kamala's people and Jill Biden.
Yeah,
because Kamala's people want Joe out of the way, and Jill Biden does not want that because she's in power. Mm-hmm. And she's taking pictures behind the desk in Air Force One as if she's the president, prepping for meetings and stuff. I mean, it's crazy stuff. And I have a big problem with first ladies and first men or whatever they're going to be, because they're not elected to shit, and nobody voted for them. And if they want to do some charitable stuff or they have some hobby, fine, But when they start talking policy, we don't have royalty here. We don't have a king and queen, and I don't like the idea that we call presidents president after they're out of office, or governors, or anybody else, because once you're a senator, they call you senator till the end of the days. Well, if you get voted out of office or you get your term ends, you're not a senator anymore. It's not a royalty. You're not a duke or a lord, right? And it's an offensive concept to an American citizen to have titles, but we do. And it's another language thing. Mm-hmm. There should be no titles. We shouldn't be calling retired judges judge. Except, colloquially, mm-hmm. I know him personally. I'll call him judge if I see him, but I'm not going to call some guy I don't know judge because they used to be judge. And they tell
me at that point, he's just a private citizen.
He's just Joe or whatever,
Mr. or Mrs. At that point, doesn't matter.
And that's when I'll drop the N-word. You're not a judge. You're a retired judge. You don't mean shit anymore.
Yeah,
part of my language, but so to speak. Yeah, it's a crazy world, and I think it's going to swing back. I'm getting more and more optimistic lately.
Really?
Yeah, the crazier they get, the more optimistic I get, because you're doing it too fast. Doing too fast.
You're losing the people who used to agree with you.
Right, because the working class people, well, that and combining with their stupid economic policies. I mean, the gas has jumped to like 40% in a year, and that hits you. That hits you on a regular basis. Every week, you see that at the pump. And those people that hate Trump, at some point they'll be like, dang it,
But you saved 16 cents on 4th of July items.
Yeah, no, you didn't. And that's a lie, too. because they did some sort of stupid calculation on a hot dog or whatever.
For some context, the White House official Twitter tweeted out, "Oh, you're saving 16 cents because you know cheese is like 2 cents cheaper than it was last year or something like that."
Right,
It's like,
some ridiculous thing. But driving to the store just cost me $2.50.
Yeah.
And all these other things everything's going up. And so for number one, it's a lie. The cost actually for those items hasn't gone down. It's all going up. Everything's going up. And sharper than in my lifetime since when I was a kid. And when I was very young during Carter, well, my parents were Democrats way back when, and they became.
Well, I know you used to be a Democrat.
Well, yeah. But they were Reagan Democrats because they lived through Jimmy Carter, who had the unique talent of having inflation and a stagnant economy at the same time, called stagflation. Because usually with inflation, you have this booming economy that you have too much demand and not enough supply. Well, he had a shit economy, and the prices are going up. You couldn't get anything, and the prices are going up. Yeah, and that's when they had like. Things weren't marked with barcodes, so now it's computerized, but you have stickers, right? So they have a little price sticker thing. It's a little for your time, and prices would go up so high, you'd have multiple stickers on things, stickers over stickers, 5 of them, because the price has gone up in the month or two it was on the shelf, and they had to reprice it because the price is just shooting up, and the rate we're on now is the highest inflation increase over a short term that we've had in decades. And it is unsustainable. And come next year when the elections, I think the Democrats are going to get wiped out. And it's going to be a huge historic proportion. And their only chance is suppressing the Republican vote and fraud. There's the only way they can get they're going to get wiped out in the House and the Senate. Both. And then it's going to be really interesting because, quite frankly, they owe Biden a couple impeachments, because now we just impeach you because you don't like it. Yeah. And the activities of Hunter Biden.
That's another thing. It kind of goes
Biden.
back to language, the whole impeachment thing. Well, that's just basically trying to label somebody,
right.
You can impeach somebody without going through I don't think a lot of people realize this. You can impeach somebody without actually going through the court system. Without actually having a trial. If you just vote to impeach them, then they're technically impeached.
Right. That's what Nancy Pelosi said. She said he will now forever be impeached. He's an impeached president.
Yes. Well, it's kind of like the other side of the pole of the title sort of thing. Yeah.
Right.
And that was always be impeached. Well, sure, but you didn't have a trial.
Right. Well, they did.
Well, they did, but it didn't.
But they didn't. They didn't. They didn't have evidence.
Mm-hmm.
They expedited the impeachment process, so they just voted on it. And they had argument, but they never had any witnesses. Like back in Nixon, they had long hearings, and because he still had a lot of Republican support until there was the 18-minute tape that was accidentally erased. They had it was not known at the time, but he had a recording system in the White House, in the Oval Office, and so. Once it was revealed that there were recordings, of course, the Congress jumped all over it. There's a big fight over whether it was confidential or not, whether they had to turn it over, whether it was an executive privilege, and ultimately Israel had to turn it over. So he turned it over, except for there was like 18-minute section, which was a very, very coincidentally important section. And the story was that his secretary had accidentally hit the foot pedal that would delete the tape when she picked up the phone, and they took a picture of her in this position where she has like her foot way over here and she's answering the phone way over on the other side, and the joke was that it looked like she was sliding into third base. And that, among other things, was really what brought him down. And then they voted to impeach him. They impeached him. It was a wide margin. And then the congressional Republicans said, "Hey, look, we're going to remove you." So then he resigned, and then Ford came in and pardoned him for any crimes that would have occurred, which there's a debate whether that was a good idea or not.
Yeah.
Because if he was guilty of stuff, probably should have been tried. But Or if he could have got his day in court, maybe he was found not guilty. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
no, he's kind of left that lingering thing out there. But
kind of to wrap all this up, I think 'cause we got to end this pretty soon. To kind of
we have the 2 hour mark yet?
hour
This is like
hour 15.
This is like a Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
But to kind of tie it back into language, kind of going back to the whole tweet thing, and now with
Yes.
the impeachment that we're talking about, and with hate speech and everything, it's so important to actually look at the words being said
Yes.
and determine actually for yourself empirically, without just hearing, oh, he's been impeached, oh, he was banned because of X, Y, and Z, oh, this person said this.
Yeah.
To actually look at the language being used, look at the context, because if you're not doing that, you're not getting the full sense of language there. You're not actually
Right.
figuring out what's being said. And I think that's the most important thing for everybody to do right now.
Well, and getting the quotes too.
Yes.
Not getting the paraphrasing, and even in local media, it's they often make honest mistakes, and so you should never trust any story about anyone based solely upon anonymous sources. That is the rule right now. It used to be you'd have a couple anonymous sources and you have a couple on the record. Now it's like all anonymous. Everything about Trump during his presidency was anonymous sources, and all of it turned out to be wrong. It's crazy. But yeah, you're right. You have to understand the language. You have to get the right sources. I'd also say just turn off social media and read a book.
Yeah.
If it's not on print, and man, they're going to wipe out a lot of. They're already stealth editing old stories,
Really?
old columns by people because they're problematic. So they stealth edit them. So if you wrote something for Washington Post 10 years ago, they're editing them to be current with today's morality, because morality is changing so quickly, which in itself is a joke, because it was either right or wrong at the time, and so now all the stuff that we know is based in the cloud, literally in the cloud, and anybody can just erase that. And like our court system set up electronically. So like I have a jury trial Wednesday, but if the power goes out Wednesday, we don't have a trial because there's no way for the court to do that.
Really?
I mean, I'll have paper exhibits before then, but for the judge to even have a docket, everything's on computers. All the documents are scanned and filed, and so think about what do we have that's all that's on paper. Very few things. And if the power goes off, you got nothing. You got the books on this shelf. But we don't have any of the internet. We don't have any of the documents. Either your Google Docs are gone. And then you think, wait a second. If you can control that, you can control the entire flow of information to an entire country. And that's what's happening right now. That is literally happening. And that's very, very dangerous.
Yes.
So that either needs to be stopped very, very soon, or it's war, because that's what's coming. I mean, real, actual murdering people in the streets war, because it's too big of a temptation for people to have that kind of power and control, and they're moving on it. And they're trying to consolidate between the social media and the internet. Google and Facebook and Twitter, they're all coordinating and trying to silence people and editing what is documented as true and false and all that stuff. These discussions are important. There's still enough out there. They can't just shut us down altogether, because there are people like Joe Rogan, who has millions of listeners every week. If they shut him down, they're opening up a can of worms. But if they don't get wiped out next year, we're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, we collectively, every last one of us, man, woman, and child, it's in deep trouble. And I don't think people understand how bad it could be. Because nobody wants that. Yeah. Nobody who knows what it would be wants it, because it would be a lot of death, a lot of destruction. Our economy is strong, but it's almost like a house of cards. You have a major disruption, as we saw in the pandemic. I mean, there was a stay-at-home order, and every shelf in the country got wiped out. Groceries across the country were wiped out in a matter of hours. If we have our supply chains upended for a month, we're all in deep trouble. How do you like that for an optimistic take?
Yeah, that uplifting thing, I think it's probably about time to wrap things up.
I could talk for another 3 hours.
Yeah, I know you can. This has been Unlimited Opinions. You can still follow us on Twitter. Do you know the Twitter handle, Dad?
I do not know the secret quote.
Capital U, lowercase LMTD, and opinions with a capital O. So you can find us there too. I tweet out whenever tweets are, or whenever episodes are live. So if you're ever worried about missing an episode, you can go there.
If you make an interesting comment, we'll send you a free t-shirt.
Yes, which we have not designed yet. Been 30 episodes about, and we still have
34 episodes. I still have a comment.
Well, I didn't make it the first episode. It was like 10
that's
episodes
true.
or so.
Yes, all right. Very good.
So I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
This has been Unlimited Opinions. It was a very uplifting episode, Dad. It was fantastic.
Well, you got me on the rant.
So it was
How did we get on
good. It was a good conversation.
It's depressing.
Yes, it was depressing.
Depressing because it's too real.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I'm optimistic. I am.
That's good to hear.
I think we're going to have a good, nice, old-fashioned election. Everything's going to go swimmingly. And I don't know who our president's going to be come next November.
All right.
Because Joe Biden's not going to live that long. He's a drop dead, man.